And the old RP show continues, everybody. Episode number 1501, but just our second with our brand new production company, producer Corey and Skycron. It's been amazing to deal with. And speaking of amazing, we're very pleased to welcome our good friend Dave Naylor, sports journalist at TSN. His bio says, football insider of all leagues. How you doing, David?
Very well, Rod. Thank you for that kind introduction. I was interested in that commercial during our break there. Mark Chestnut, man, I saw him at the New York State Fair in Syracuse about 1990, probably 2000. There you go.
Was it amazing?
It was. He was opening for Tim McGraw. It was a very good show.
Yeah. Oh, June 28th in Moose Jaw. I'll be there in the whatever they're calling it now, the arena in Moose Jaw. Dave, football-wise, and you're always an engaging, very popular guest with our viewers because of the football component. We're 1 week into the preseason. NFL OT up next week. What's got and then the flag football component. What's top of mind for you right now in the gridiron?
You know, I think it's just kind of watching some of the depth charts play out. And I think what's really intriguing, and I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, is, look, we know that every league is a function of its quarterbacks, and Canadian football even more so. And we've had some years where there's been crisis, where we had, the Anthony Calvillos, the Dave Dickinsons, the Henry Burrises. Those guys kind of moved out, and it felt like there was a bit of a void in their wake. And, I was going through recently looking at, there's a number of quarterbacks in the league who are being promoted to opportunities that they haven't necessarily proven that they're ready for. The teams believe they're ready for. And that's no different, say, than Nathan Rourke in 2022 when the BC Lions, played a hunch, made Nathan Rourke with 2 career starts their starting quarterback, and he turned out to be the best player in the league. Montreal's kind of doing that with Davis Alexander. He was the number 3 a year ago. He had a handful of starts. Now he's going to be the number 1. Trey Ford, who's been, on the field and off the field and occupied every seat of the depth chart in Edmonton during his 3 seasons there, is now the definite number 1. And yet you have a number group of guys who are not ready to retire. Cody Fajardo's not ready to retire, even though he's not a starter in the league this year, after being, the betting favorite for most outstanding player for most of last season. McLeod Bethel-Thompson's not ready to retire. Jeremiah Manzoli's not ready to retire. So I was crunching the math on the backup quarterbacks recently. And the math was so astounding, I had to check it like 5 times because I was like, this can't be right. Take PJ Walker out of it because he's never played in the CFL. He's the backup in Calgary this year to Vernon Adams. The other 8 backup quarterbacks in the league, based on the experience behind the starters, have thrown collectively for 82,000 yards and 404 touchdowns. So when you look at 1 through 2 across the league, we may not have, the star caliber that we had 15 years ago in the league in terms of quarterbacks, but in terms of depth, and one thing we have learned in this league is you need 2. I don't know that I've ever seen the kind of depth across the league at quarterback position that we're seeing this season.
Well, and they're the ones that sell the tickets. They're the ones you want to keep healthy, and the coaches have figured out that you don't win unless you have 2, like you've said.
Well, the league has strengthened the penalties on quarterbacks. It's easier to eject guys. It's easier to get 25-yard penalties. It's in everybody's interest to keep them healthy.
Who's got the best quarterback room as we enter the season?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. Let me see. Best quarterback room. Let's see here. It could be Saskatchewan because you've got, Trevor Harris, who's still legit starter, with Jake Mayer, who's been a starter for 3 years behind him. If Trey Ford is really good, again, the guy playing behind him and Cody Fajardo I thought Cody Fajardo's first half last year was the best football he played of his career. And then he had the injury, and he didn't come back the same guy. And ultimately, I think, I don't know if they know that they didn't want to lose Davis Alexander. That's a big part of why Montreal made that decision. But I think when you look at depth, you could say Saskatchewan. I think you'd look at Calgary. If PJ Walker is as advertised, this is a guy who started 9 games in the NFL, played in about 25, was very good in the XFL as well. You look at the combination of him and Vernon Adams. Those would be the ones that would jump out at me. And perhaps Montreal, if Davis Alexander is what we think he's going to be. You've just got guys behind them that were legit frontline starters, last year. So Yeah, those are the teams that would jump out at me. Even a team like Ottawa with Drew Brown, and they've got Matthew Schultz and Dustin Crum sort of battling it out behind them. There's again, we're just. It seemed like 3 years ago, Rod, most of the backups in the league had 0 starts or a handful, and we've just got so much depth now across the league.
It's very fun to watch the trends, and the reason I asked you this question is it just piggybacks off your comment about the experience at the backup position. Our director of scouting, Craig Smith, is watching. You know him. He says
Yep.
possibly Edmonton, best QB room. Jeff, the Stamps fan, says, I'm not sure if PJ Walker is signed for 1 or 2 years in Calgary, but if it's 1, he will start somewhere next year. And if I may throw mine in, I think it's Saskatchewan with what those backups have accomplished in Calgary. I watched that game in Winnipeg on CFL Plus, which, by the way, worked great for me, Dave. I don't know what all the
Awesome.
bitching was about. I get if it didn't
Awesome.
work for everybody that you would be upset, but what do you know about that situation? Tech is tough. Have we figured that out yet? Tech is not easy to pull off.
No, but if you want, it's like anything, Rod. If you're going to work out the kinks, you do it in the preseason. Coaches do that, players do that, officials do that. Tech does that. There you go.
Absolutely. Well, I got to ask you this too. Stu Johnston, the new commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
You guys all worked with him for years.
Yep.
And you all love him, but I'm like, you kind of got to say that. Dave Randorf came up to me in the press box here in Sunrise, voice of the Lightning, a couple of weeks ago. He goes, he's exactly what the CFL needs. Great guy. You know how fired up Rambo is. He has the endorsed Stu Johnston. Number 1 fan is Dave Randorf. How will the league change? Because I feel like if it is, it's very slowly changing under the new commissioner.
I think Stuart, it's coming at it from a television background. It's all about what grabs attention and what's entertaining. And I think he's going to try and maximize and blow up things that can be, by blow up, I mean, make them bigger deal. Things that will grab attention, things that will grab notice, and maybe try and minimize some things that don't grab that much attention and all that. And I think he's like, you're right. Everybody at TSN says wonderful things about Stu Johnston, and you say, well, you got to say those things, which kind of makes it too bad because in this case, people really mean them. And I mean, besides the fact that he's a good guy, that's not why he got hired. What we're talking about leadership. We're talking about decision making. We're talking about kind of integrity and trust that everybody had in Stuart, and that was universal at TSN. But I think the things that would make me agree with Dave Randorf about him being perfect for the CFL is that he's a guy who understands the league. He's the first commissioner I've ever seen, Rod, who's actually worked in the CFL's business environment. If you look at other leagues, NBA, and the NBA promotes Adam Silver, came from the NBA. Roger Goodell's never had a job in his life where his employer wasn't the NFL. And even Gary Bettman was number 2 in the NBA when he comes over to the NHL. The CFL has generally gone outside of the sphere of its business to hire commissioners. And I think there's a real limitation to that because there's so much learning on the job to be done in this because it's such a specific job that I think that makes it challenging. In Stu Johnston's case, because of his involvement through TSN as the league's biggest business partner, I'll give you an example. He understands something like the dynamic with the Board of Governors. And, oh, by the way, each of the personalities of all of them. Look, none of that would be learning for him on the job. He would know that walking in day number 1. He understands governance. He's certainly been a keen observer of the league and would have ideas of things. And when it comes to some tough stuff, I don't think he's going to be a weepy sentimentalist if it's something that's ultimately going to make the league better and more prosperous. I mean, I think he knows what the job is. And ultimately, he's a guy who's, I say, a very strong leadership guy, very strong decision maker. And, I share Dave's excitement legitimately about, what he's going to be able to do as commissioner of the CFL.
Well, I've known all you guys a long time, and I know you guys are great guys. I was facetiously saying you got to say that. I can't, but the,
well,
the only
true, though. It's true. We would have to say it, but in this case, it's too bad that we would have to because in this case, we just want to pound the table and go. We would, this is true. We're not just saying this.
Hey, one of his first major moves was suspending Zach Calleros. I don't think you do that easily. And by the way, I don't know if you follow what my coverage is doing, but I'm not lifting up the rug and looking under it anymore. Whatever. I don't want to know what went into it. You can suspend the face of the league. That's not a light decision. So it tells me that Stuart is not afraid to make the tough decisions.
No, and they reduced it from 2 to 1, right? Because by the books it says 2 games, and they reduced it to 1 because they changed the protocol at the same time. Like they basically acknowledged that their rule was not fully flushed out. That the idea you should be able to reach out to a team if you cannot reach a guy in the offseason, and there was no protocol to do that. Now you can't just ignore it altogether and say, well, we have this rule, but whoops, it caught a star quarterback in this mesh, so we're just going to ignore it. You can't ignore rules that you have. But I think you can, in this case, taking it from 2 to 1 games, I don't think you could do that unless you were changing the protocol at the same time to say in the future, this won't happen. That at least it won't happen this way. So, I thought where they came down on that one. I mean, whose interest is it to have Zach Calleros not playing? Unless you're the team that's lining up against him, that would be the only ones.
I watched the Stu Johnston introductory news conference also on CFL Plus. It seems to work very well in Boca Raton, Florida. I'll tell you that. And he was very bullish on flag football. I think you were there.
Yeah.
You certainly watched it. And I think you asked a question or two. Was there a hint in there about the Olympics, or am I marrying something that's not there?
Well, yes and no. And I think on its own, the Olympics aside, Stu Johnston is very bullish on flag football because he sees it as a way to engage, young people of both genders. Women play it, girls play it, boys play it, men play it. It really broadens the appeal of football. And he believes that, and that is sort of consistent with something else that I should have mentioned in terms of where Stuart, and he mentioned this during his address, is look, the elephant in the room on the CFL, in terms of, I've always believed the biggest challenge is that for every fan that passes away, you've got to replace them. And if you don't, your fan base is going to age out. And we all know that at different points in the league, the fan base looks different. Some places it looks pretty young, other places it looks very old. And that to me, just generationally, because, I'll do things like if I'm riding the GO train to an Argo game and I'll see a bunch of teenagers or people in their early 20s are going to the game, I'll strike up a conversation with them. Why are you interested in the game? Do your friends watch this? Why don't they? Just trying to understand it. And it's absolutely clear to me that the generational thing is the biggest existential threat to the CFL. And I think Stu Johnston knows that. And I think whether it's, putting content on social media platforms that guys my age don't use, but 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds do, or whether it's, doing things like championing flag football, the idea that this game needs to be wired into a younger generation is, I think, central in what Stu Johnston wants to do, and flag football is a part of that. Now, the second part of your question, Olympics, yes, I do believe we will hear some announcement about the CFL and the Olympic team partnering within the next couple of months. I think those conversations are going on. What exactly that looks like, what are the implications for the CFL? Because the NFL kind of had a layup, right? They came out and said, yeah, we're in, but their season's not to be interrupted. Okay? The CFL is a little different. And here's the tricky part, okay? I think the flag football teams are, 11, 12 players for the Olympics? If it's 10 NFL guys and 2 CFL guys for Team Canada, are you going to shut the league down for 3 weeks? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like that you would. Now, the question is, and I understand the tournament is not a long tournament in the Olympics. It's a very short part of the calendar. Obviously, it's not like hockey where you could just get a bunch of guys, have a couple practices and play like you can in the Olympics. In football, you need a lot more coordination. So there's time you need with teammates and things like that. And some of that could be done virtually along the way. But it's a weird one for the CFL because there's no way of being able to predict how many of your players will be participating and what significance they are going to mean to the teams that be without them. So I don't know where that lands because that's a real tricky one for the league to navigate. I could see, maybe a very shortened break, but I don't think we're going to see, a month of CFL football not being played in the summer of 28 to accommodate the Olympics or anything like that.
Amar Dolman was on here a couple of weeks ago and basically said, we talked about it at the league level and don't see how we could do it. Our schedule is on while they're playing. He was honest about it, but then Stu Johnston came out and said he very badly thinks they should be involved. So I'm like, again, not looking under the carpet here, supporting whatever they do. Typical of the CFL in a pinch. Nothing comes easy to the CFL.
Well, and again, it's a very tough one. If you knew right now, right? Like if you knew right now that let's say, let's just use quarterbacks for, okay. we could pretty safely say right now that the quarterback for Team Canada for the Olympics is probably going to be one of Nathan Rourke, Trey Ford, Curtis Rourke, Taylor Elgersma, or Christian Veilleux, who is the senior at Pitt, who was at Penn State, and he's a senior at Georgia State. He was at Penn State and Pitt before. He's a Division I starting quarterback who will be in the draft next year. I would say probably pretty good chance Canada's quarterbacks, and I assume it's going to be one of those guys. And if you knew that you were going to be missing Nathan Rourke in the summer of 28, you just scheduled the BC Lions on a bye week for the week of the Olympic tournament, right? But the problem is you don't know, and you're not going to know till the spring of 28. That's what makes it tricky.
Yeah, it's not easy. I don't envy them. And as I say again, supporting whatever they do. How are we doing, producer Corey, for time? I feel like we're getting right up against it with David here. Ish. Okay, about 2 minutes. He's going to bark in your ear, Dave, when we got to go. It's a hard out, just so you know, with our new crew.
You got it. All good.
Do you have a Grey Cup pick? I said Winnipeg, Toronto, but I'm not married to that. I'm waiting till the week one.
I'm kind of going, and again, I'm not big on predictions, so this is just kind of a gut thing. I'm kind of going Sask, Ottawa. Yeah.
A rematch of 1966 and 1976. Yeah, well, both.
Yeah. I mean, I think the intriguing thing for me about Saskatchewan is that if you go through the teams in the West, everybody else has kind of major question marks because of turnover, right? Like Winnipeg doesn't have their OC, and they've had more roster turnover than any time in this sort of Grey Cup era. Calgary is a total remake. Edmonton, everything from ownership down to downward is different. BC's got a new head coach and a lot of new players. And, you go through them all and say, well, which one's the model of stability? Well, Saskatchewan, the coaching staff's intact. The roster's intact. The guys, they did way more adding than subtracting off the roster. And I think in a league where everybody else is dealing with significant transition, having a staff and a roster that's very much, in sync with where you were a year ago and building on that, I can see that being a leg up for the Rough Riders in the West.
I've got them 12 wins in first place, but as you know, that doesn't automatically mean going to the Grey Cup, right? I think Winnipeg's going to do whatever they can to get there because they're hosting. They've got the 3 Grey Cup losing streak on the line. It's a hell of a story.
Yeah.
A lot of great stories, Dave, going into the season, as there always are.
Always. Well, to me, the first 2 months of the season is the most intriguing part because there's so much turnover year to year, players changing teams, different roles for guys. It's always like kind of like lifting the lid on the season is what the first month is for me, and I watch kind of with special attention to everything I see during the first month because I just think we learn so much during that time about what actually every team is, and I think a lot of teams are still in development the first month of the season in a league, as I say, with this much turnover where you've got 2.5 weeks of training camp. Not every evaluation or decision is firm by the time you get to the end of camp. A lot of this carries through to the first month of the season.
June 5th for the Riders. Ottawa is at Mosaic Stadium. That's the lid lifter. Maybe a Grey Cup preview. You heard it here first from William Naylor. There you go, buddy. Okay, Dave, don't exit out of your camera, but we will let you go. We're less than 30 seconds to a break. So we'll be seeing you on the trail, bud.
I look forward to catching up.
There you go. TSN's Dave Naylor. Oh, my. Corey, don't expect it's going to be that good all the time. We'll be right back.